Well, I led off last class. Someone else should lead off. Mother Tulsi Priya, you want to lead off the kirtan? As a suggestion. Yeah.
I'm not really able to today, Prabhu. Please do so.
Okay, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay.
All right. Shar, Doug, want to do the kirtan? You want to do a duet?
We'd love to hear your voice, Pita.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah.
What about Surabi?
Yeah.
I don't sing. You go ahead, Panchatattva Prabhu.
Or Mother Saraswati. Mother Saraswati, would you like to lead the kirtan?
Haribol, pranams to everyone. I'm sorry, but I've kind of come down with a really bad cold.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
I've got
Okay.
a very sore throat. Sorry.
Okay. I hope you feel better. Om Jnana Timarandasya Jnanjana Salakaya Chakshurunmilitan Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvirsesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadi Go Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa, Vrivrajacharya Astottara Sata Shri Srimad, His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa, Vrivrajacharya Astottara Sata Shri Srimad, His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Brindi Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shyamakund Radha Kund Gir Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Navadvip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Mayi Ki Jai. Jamuna Mayi Ki Jai. Tulasi Devi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande.
Hari Bol. Thank you so much, Panchatattva Prabhu, and welcome to everyone for Srimad Bhagavatam class with His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami and friends. It is Friday, November 3rd, 2023, and we are in Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, 25th chapter tonight, starting with text number 28. Looking forward to hear all of our able-voiced participants reading and commenting and chanting this evening. Thank you all for being here, and thank you, Maharaj, especially for being here with us. Hare Krishna.
The
I
last
have
text
I
I
have
have in the chat. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was looking at my previous chat from Wednesday, and the last verse that we looked like we commented on was text 27. If I could be wrong,
Yes.
that's what the chat says.
Okay, so I guess we're on 28.
Surabhi Kunj says we did 28.
Okay. 29 it is. So I guess I'll read something. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So Mother Devahuti has inquired, what kind of devotional service is worth developing and practicing to help me easily and immediately attain the service of your lotus feet? And she continues to ask questions. Text 29. Yo yoga bhagavad bharano nirvanatmangs tvayoditaha kidrisha katichangani etastadvava bodhanam. Translation. The mystic yoga system, as you have explained, aims at the Supreme Personality of Godhead and is meant for completely ending material existence. Please let me know the nature of that yoga system. How many ways are there by which one can understand in truth that sublime yoga? Purport. There are different kinds of mystic yoga systems aiming for different phases of the absolute truth. The Jnana Yoga system aims at the impersonal Brahman effulgence, and the Hatha Yoga system aims at the localized personal aspect, the Paramatma feature of the absolute truth. Whereas Bhakti Yoga, or devotional service, which is executed in 9 different ways, headed by hearing and chanting, aims at complete realization of the Supreme Lord. There are different methods of self-realization. But here, Devahuti especially refers to the Bhakti Yoga system, which has already been primarily explained by the Lord. The different parts of the Bhakti Yoga system are hearing, chanting, remembering, offering prayers, worshiping the Lord in the temple, accepting service to him, carrying out his orders, making friendship with him, and ultimately surrendering everything for the service of the Lord. The word nirvanatman is very significant in this verse. Unless one accepts the process of devotional service, one cannot end the continuation of material existence. As far as jnanis are concerned, they're interested in jnana yoga. But even if one elevates oneself after a great performance of austerity to the Brahman effulgence, there's a chance of falling down again to the material world. Therefore, jnana yoga does not actually end material existence. Similarly, regarding the Hatha yoga system, which aims at the localized aspect of the Lord, Paramatma, it has been experienced that many yogis, such as Vishvamitra, fall down. But bhakti yogis, once approaching the Supreme Personality of Godhead, never come back to this material world, as it is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. Yadgatva nanivartante. Upon going, one never comes back. Tyaktva deham punarjanma naiti. After giving up this body, he never comes back again to accept a material body. Nirvana does not finish the existence of the soul. The soul is ever existing. Therefore, nirvana means to end one's material existence. And to end material existence means to go back home, back to Godhead. Sometimes it is asked how the living entity falls down from the spiritual world to the material world. Here is the answer. Unless one is elevated to the Vaikuntha planets, directly in touch with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he's prone to fall down, either from the impersonal Brahman realization or from an ecstatic trance of meditation. Another word in this verse, Bhagavad Banaha, is very significant. Banaha means arrow. The Bhakti Yoga system is just like an arrow aiming up to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Bhakti Yoga system never urges one towards the impersonal Brahman effulgence or up to the point of Paramatma realization. This Banaha, or arrow, is so sharp and swift that it goes directly to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, penetrating the regions of impersonal Brahman and localized Paramatma. Om Jnana Tamarandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshurumanitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So, right from the beginning of Devahuti's questions to Kapila Dev, Lord Kapila Dev, Prabhupada is saying that Devahuti is indicating bhakti yoga or devotional service. He says in the purport, but here Devahuti especially refers to the bhakti yoga system, which has already been primarily explained by the Lord. And Prabhupada goes on to explain the different parts of the Bhakti Yoga system: Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Bandhanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam, hearing, chanting, remembering, offering prayers, temple worship of the Lord, service, carrying out orders, making friendship, and surrendering everything. And Prabhupada goes on to describe this nirvana conception as being incomplete without understanding that nirvana means to go back home, back to Godhead, or Brahma Nirvana, elsewhere in the Bhagavad Gita. The popular conception of nirvana is often referenced when hearing from Buddhists or something. And nirvana means cessation of material existence. But there's a positive side. That positive side is a realization of one's spiritual nature. It's not just the negative, but there's a positive on the other side. By a materialistic conception, which we have been tightly bound to through many terms of existence in this material world, you cannot understand the absolute truth. You have to hear from authorities who have realized the absolute truth to break free from this narrow conception of what it means to attain liberation. We think that it must mean freedom from material suffering, but we have no positive information. So the positive information is given to some degree by the impersonalists, to another degree by the followers of the mystic yoga system, but in the full degree, in complete truth, by the expert practitioners, the expert successful bhakti yogis who have understood fully the absolute truth. Prabhupada has said in other places that one who realizes the Supreme Personality of Godhead in person automatically realizes impersonal Brahman and localized Paramatma, because they're included. The Paramatma is the localized aspect of that Supreme Bhagavan, and the Brahman is his effulgence. So they're all different aspects of looking at the same thing. Prabhupada many times gave the example of the sunshine, the sun planet, and then within the planet there's a being, sun god. So there's different aspects to understanding the absolute truth in the same way. And rather than a partial understanding, which is an incomplete understanding, is another way of saying incomplete, a full understanding is given there in bhakti yoga and devotional service. Hare Krishna. Any comments?
Saraswati Mataji has her hand raised.
Please.
I think I need, I hope you can understand my voice is a little bit fuzzy.
Here, we can hear you.
Thank you. So I'm still a little bit confused, and I'm hoping that I can, my misunderstandings can be removed. So I'm not opposed to Bhakti Yoga being the most recommended and the easiest method for attaining love of God, but I'm still a little bit confused about this Paramatma feature. Now in Caitanya-caritamrta, in Madhya Leela, it says, Brahma realization, Paramatma realization, they are not perfect realization of the absolute truth. Partial realization, Brahma realization means realization of the absolute truth in eternity. Paramatma realization of the absolute truth is realization of eternity and knowledge. And Krishna realization means full realization of the absolute truth, meaning eternity, knowledge, and bliss. But where I'm confused is this Paramatma realization, because Paramatma is Shirodakshai, Vishnu. So yogis that are meditating on Paramatma, they're automatically meditating on Shirodakshai Vishnu, which is the personal form of the Lord, Vishnu Tattva. And if they were meditating, that's one of the forms of bhakti anyway, because remembering, meditating, this is one of the form, Noda bhakti. So I'm not understanding if a yogi is meditating on Shirodakshai Vishnu as Paramatma, he's already doing one form of the bhakti, meditating, remembering Krishna. And so he already has realized the personal form of the Lord in the form of Shirodakshai Vishnu. So I'm not understanding why that would be a partial understanding. They're already meditating on the personal form of the Lord in the form of Shirodakshai Vishnu. That's a Vishnu Tattva. So I'm a little bit confused as to how that can be partial a realization. Thank you.
Sure. Well, I would offer one way to see it is to understand what that means, eternity, knowledge, and bliss. To have knowledge of the localized aspect of the Supreme is one thing, but to be engaged fully in a relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead is something beyond that. That's where that Satchit Ananda, complete experience, is to be found. It's also interesting to note that oftentimes we read and hear how those who are engaged in Hatha Yoga will reach some understanding of understanding of Paramatma, but then mistake the Paramatma for themselves. So there's that aspect. What to speak of the problematic aspect of being engaged in mystic yoga and being detoured or sidetracked by the acquisition of material siddhis. But it's the one of the unique aspects that we read of and hear from the acharyas of, in terms of the realization of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or Bhagavan, is this Sambandha Abhideya Prayojana, that one comes to understand that he has a relationship with the Supreme Lord. He acts in terms of that relationship, and then he develops love of Godhead. So it goes beyond its impersonal aspect, which is there's somewhat of an impersonal aspect, even in terms of Paramatma realization, because there's no real relationship. It's meditation, so there's that much, but it's very neutral. And we know that the Paramatma is, as you said, an expansion of the of Kshirodakashayi Vishnu. He's presenting Kshirodakashayi Vishnu is presenting himself in every atom, in every corner of creation, in every living being. And the Kshirodakashayi Vishnu is an expansion of Krishna. So that arrow, this is where that I would refer to that metaphor at the end of the purport. Unless one is elevated to the Vaikuntha planets, directly in touch with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is prone to fall down, either from the impersonal Brahman realization or from the ecstatic trance of meditation. Another word in this verse, Bhagavad Banaha, is very significant. Banaha means arrow. The Bhakti Yoga system is just like an arrow aiming up to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Bhakti Yoga system never urges one towards the impersonal Brahman effulgence or to the point of Paramatma realization. The Banaha, or arrow, is so sharp and swift that it goes directly to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, penetrating the regions of impersonal Brahman and localized Paramatma. So above and beyond, swiftly, the process of Bhakti Yoga takes one to the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Does anyone else have something to offer?
Maharaj says, the meditation on Vishnu in the heart is incomplete because it doesn't include his activities.
Yeah.
They don't meditate on his pastimes in the Shira ocean. And Tulsi Priyamataji says, there is no rasa in meditation on the Paramatma, no exchange of service with all the senses. And Tulsi Priyamataji has raised her hand.
Go ahead.
Hare Krishna.
Haribol.
I was just remembering something once Gopi Puranadana Prabhu was saying about, because Prabhupada has said, even though he says you don't come back from the spiritual world once you go there, but Prabhupada has said in other situation, in answer to other questions, that you don't come back, but you could. You always have that option. And Gopi Puranadana Prabhu said once, he says, it's like if you jump off the Empire State Building. If you happen to survive, you probably won't go back up and try again.
That's a good analogy. A good
But
example.
you could if you wanted to, but you probably
You're
most
really
likely
dumb. You gotta be really dumb. Hare Krishna.
Saraswati Mataji has raised her hand.
Please.
So I was also reading something that Srila Prabhupada said when somebody asked him. Somebody said, if we came, but it is also said that we come from there originally. They're talking about the spiritual world. If we came from there, how did we fall if we were already there? And Srila Prabhupada said, yes, just like example that personalities like Brahma and Shiva, they also sometimes become victims of Maya. So our potency of falling down is also there. And because we are part and parcel of God, and because we are now in the material world, it is to be understood that we have fallen down. But you cannot trace out the history when you have fallen down. That is impossible, but our position is marginal. At any moment, we can fall down. That tendency is there. Therefore, we are called marginal. Just like it is very simple to understand, everyone is prone to fall disease. Now, when you are diseased, there is no necessity of finding out the history when you became diseased. You are diseased. Make your treatment. That's all. So just in this material condition of life, just go on treating. And as soon as you are cured, be careful not to fall down again. Terrible.
Mother Saraswati, were you satisfied with some of the responses to your question?
Very much so. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you, Guru Maharaj and Tulsi Priya. Someone like to read the next verse?
Which one are we on?
We are on 29. Wait a minute. Excuse me. Sorry. 30.
30? Okay.
Yeah.
Tad etan me vijanihi yataham mandadir hare shukham buddhyeya durbodham yoshabhavad anugrahat. Translation. My dear son, Kapila, after all, I am a woman. It is very difficult for me to understand the absolute truth because my intelligence is not very great. But if you will kindly explain it to me, even though I am not very intelligent, I can understand it and thereby feel transcendental happiness. Purport. Knowledge of the absolute truth is not very easily understood by ordinary, less intelligent men. But if the spiritual master is kind enough to the disciple, however unintelligent the disciple may be, then by the divine grace of the spiritual master, everything is revealed. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur therefore says, Yasya prasadad, by the mercy of the spiritual master, the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhagavat Prasada, is revealed. Devahuti requested her great son to be merciful towards her because she was a less intelligent woman and also his mother. By the grace of Kapiladev, it was quite possible for her to understand the absolute truth, even though the subject matter is very difficult for ordinary persons, especially women.
Would you like to comment?
No. I'm very curious to hear what everyone else has to say about this. It's a hot button topic. I will stay out of this one.
Well, I would just point out the first sentence that Srila Prabhupada gives in the purport, where he says, knowledge of the absolute truth is not very easily understood by ordinary, less intelligent men. I don't think that was a slip of the pen. People in this age, of course, men and women are particularly less intelligent. One can imagine, especially in the Vedic age, that there would be a vast difference between the men and women in terms of their intelligence. In this age, people are such a mess that the whole business has fallen. And therefore, our business should be to become intelligent by taking shelter of a bona fide spiritual master and practicing the Bhakti Yoga system. Then, here even if one is unintelligent, by the grace of the spiritual master, one can obtain the mercy of Krishna. And I should also point out that Devahuti, although her prayers are just wonderful and wonderfully intelligent, is also an emblem of humility here. She has had as her son, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. She has had as her husband, great sage and progenitor. So we can count her as being relatively qualified among other human beings. But she's presenting herself in this way because she's suitably advanced in spiritual life to understand her humble position. She's not arrogant in front of the spiritual master. She's not arrogant in front of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. She's not puffed up. And neither should any of us be, men or women. Looks like there's some comment in the chat box. Do you want to read, Surabhi Kunj?
Yes, Shara and Doug said, I am also thinking about how great devotees are actually humble and would not claim to be highly intelligent.
Sure. Of course, Prabhupada's position in this matter is very well expressed in many places in his, well, not many, but in a good number of places in his Bhaktivedanta purports. Women are less intelligent than men, very clearly stated. But he also said that those women who take to Krishna consciousness are very special souls. They have intelligence because they've found the right purpose and goal in life. So regardless of our particular qualifications or lack thereof, we're being offered this encouragement in this purport in Srimad Bhagavatam, that if we apply the principles of Krishna consciousness in our life and follow carefully the instructions of a bona fide spiritual master who is 100% Krishna conscious, we can obtain the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna says he carries what devotees lack and preserve what they have. He makes everything revealed to them with the torchlight of knowledge from within their hearts because they're engaged in Krishna consciousness sincerely. So that's the good fortune of devotees. Anything else?
Kendra Prabhu responds to Shara's comments, saying exactly what I was thinking also. See how Sanatan Goswami presented himself to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Yeah.
And Tulsi Priyamataji has raised her hand.
Go ahead.
Hare Krishna. I just remembered the first time I ever read one of Prabhupada's comments about women being less intelligent. And I remember thinking to myself, that doesn't apply to me. I'm different. And then the longer I practice Krishna consciousness, which presumably I'm becoming more intelligent by the process, but the longer I practice, the less intelligent I feel. And it's not because I am becoming more humble, because I still think I'm pretty gosh darn smart, but it's just that you start to realize how vast the knowledge is, how vast the whole everything about it is, how deep, vast, broad, high, and how small you are in relation to it. So I have to make the assumption that my particular lack of intelligence, I mean, everybody is less intelligent for some reason. And I can attribute a lot of my lack of intelligence to the fact that I'm in a woman's body. Now, somebody else may be less intelligent for a different reason, but I don't know. I feel like women, we're so bound to our bodies in so many ways. It affects our minds. Like I read somebody was asking a question on a public forum. They said, when did you become you? Like not when you're an entity when you're conceived, but when did you feel like you were your own person? And I thought about it and I thought menopause, because before that I was just a mass of hormones, that, and I knew that they were affecting my thinking all the time. And that's from somebody who thinks they're smart, but then once that situation changes, you realize how much you were controlled by your own body, So I can only speak for myself, but I don't think my experience is that unusual, or that, it's not uncommon. I don't think so. That's just a thought that I have, and I hope it's not too out of line. All right,
No, it's
Krishna.
good. So Prabhupada was unsparing in his scathing criticisms of persons who were philosophers and scientists who presented themselves as intelligent. He just called them mudhas because they identified with the body. They had no intelligence, and whatever was there was stolen by illusion. So, and these are persons who, by any material estimation, were head and shoulders above everybody else in human society. But as far as he was concerned, they were just dogs and hogs, because they were living with the same material goals in mind, sense gratification, however so-called elevated. Maybe they're on the platform of mental sense gratification, but really when you examine their behavior, it was just a polished animal culture. And they were counted as philosophers, and they're counted as, extraordinary men of learning. And sometimes there may be some great qualification there. But if the goal of their learning and the goal of their activities is just material acquisition, material profit adoration, material distinction, material enjoyment, Prabhupada counted them as no better. The Bhagavatam counts them as no better than polished animals. So nobody escapes that appellation of less intelligent in Kali Yuga, unless they're sincerely engaged in trying to at least they have to come to the platform of inquiring about the absolute truth, inquiring about the reason they're here, what the purpose is of human life, what I'm supposed to do with this existence. Is there something beyond this temporary confinement of this material body? Unless they're engaged in that sort of direction, the first aphorism of the Vedanta Sutra, unless they're moving in that direction, no good qualification, really. That's the position. That's the fallen position of everyone in Kali Yuga. Sorry, didn't mean to go on. Anybody else have comments?
No, that was great. It's very encouraging.
Yeah.
Saraswati Mataji says, I remember my mother once chastising me severely that I shouldn't present myself to have 1.5 times intelligent person, which translates to being a smart aleck, because a tree full of fruits always bows down. So when these natural forces like wind, those trees don't break.
Yeah.
It's a nice metaphor.
Yeah. Pride precedeth the fall, they say. The pauper is proud of his penny. Everybody in Kali Yuga is basically a pauper when it comes to intelligence. Anything else? Should we move on to the next verse?
Kendra Prabhu said, There's a gulf of difference between I am this costume and if I'm a pure spirit soul, I must have done something very smart to qualify for such a costume.
I think Tulsi Priya volunteered to read the next verse.
Great. Please.
Okay, we're ready to move on?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Maitreya Uvacha Viditvatam Kapilo Matraitam Jatasneho Yatra Tanva Bijata Tatvam Nayam Yat Pravadanti Sankyam Pravachavai Bhakti Vitana Yogam. Translation. Sri Maitreya said, after hearing the statement of his mother, Kapila could understand her purpose. and he became compassionate towards her because of being born of her body. He described the Sankhya system of philosophy, which is a combination of devotional service and mystic realization as received by disciplic succession.
Why don't you go ahead and read the next one too, Mataji?
Okay. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Devanam Gunalinganam Anushavika Karmanam Sattva Evaika Manaso Vritti Swabhaviki Tuya Animita Bhagavati Bhaktir Siddhir Gariyasi. Translation. Lord Kapila said, the senses are symbolic representations of the demigods, and their natural inclination is to work under the direction of the Vedic injunctions. As the senses are representatives of the demigods, so the mind is the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The mind's natural duty is to serve. When that service spirit is engaged in devotional service to the Personality of Godhead without any motive, that is far better even than salvation. Purport. The senses of the living entity are always engaged in some occupation, either in activities prescribed in the injunctions of the Vedas or in material activities. The natural inclination of the senses is to work for something, and the mind is the center of the senses. The mind is actually the leader of the senses. Therefore, it is called sattva. Similarly, the leader of all the demigods who are engaged in the activities of this material world, the sun god, moon god, Indra, and others, is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is stated in the Vedic literature that the demigods are different limbs of the universal body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Our senses are also controlled by different demigods. Our senses are representations of various demigods, and the mind is the representation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The senses, led by the mind, act under the influence of the demigods. When the service is ultimately aimed at the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the senses are in their natural position. The Lord is called Hrishikesha, for he is actually the proprietor and ultimate master of the senses. The senses and the mind are naturally inclined to work, but when they are materially contaminated, they work for some material benefit or for the service of the demigods. Although actually they are meant to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The senses are called Hrishika, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead is called Hrishikesha. Indirectly, all the senses are naturally inclined to serve the Supreme Lord. That is called bhakti. Kapila Dev said that when the senses, without desire for material profit or other selfish motives, are engaged in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one is situated in devotional service. That spirit of service is far better than siddhi, salvation. Bhakti, the inclination to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is in a transcendental position far better than mukti, or liberation. Thus, bhakti is the stage after liberation. Unless one is liberated, one cannot engage the senses in the service of the Lord. When the senses are engaged, either in material activities of sense gratification or in the activities of the Vedic injunctions, there is some motive. But when the same senses are engaged in the service of the Lord and there is no motive, that is called animita and is the natural inclination of the mind. The conclusion is that when the mind, without being deviated either by Vedic injunctions or by material activities, is fully engaged in Krishna consciousness or devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it is far better than the most aspired for liberation from material entanglement. Wow. This is another very comprehensive verse, or I should say purport. Of course, the verse is also comprehensive, but much more tersely expressed. What I gather from this is that there's a description, or he's describing what is natural to the senses and what is natural to the mind. And as he says, we have to work, and by work it meant to be active, to engage in some sort of activity. There's no stopping that. We were talking about nirvana before, and sometimes people think erroneously that we stop all activities, we cease to act. And that's, one of the fundamental differences between bhakti yoga and impersonalist philosophies is that, in bhakti yoga, we know that the senses exist not only in the material sense, but in the spiritual sense, and that the material senses are, facsimiles, or they're coverings over the spiritual senses, or it's the same sense, but it's wrongly applied in material pursuit, and misidentifying with the material body. But we don't say that you have to get rid of the senses, or you have to get rid of the sense activities. No, you dovetail them in the early stages of bhakti yoga. You dovetail whatever you're doing, you do it for Krishna, either directly or by giving the results. And gradually, through purification, from the process of, the practice of bhakti yoga, the senses also become purified. And then your actions are all directly for the service of the Lord. And I guess when I say dovetailing, means that we have some personal interest, like, let's say you want to work in a particular field, and that's your sense gratification. That's what you want to do, but you are able to dovetail it in the service of the Lord. But gradually that you become purified of that personal interest, and then whatever you do, you're doing it for the Lord under the direction of the spiritual master. And that becomes, it's your natural position. It's your natural position. And some people may say, I think of Jayananda Prabhu, who is driving a cab, and some people say, what's spiritual about driving a cab? But just making, for the sake of argument, the assumption that his activities were pure, and I'm prepared to accept that they were 100% pure, and it was pure devotional service. So he was driving a cab for Krishna and giving the money. And he engaged all kinds of people who had no interest whatsoever in devotional service. Guys off the street, he got them to do some service. And what's so spiritual about hammering a nail, or tightening a bolt on a cart, Rath Yatra cart? But somehow, you have to see things rightly. You have to see everything as Krishna's energy. And when you see everything as Krishna's energy, then everything that you do is spiritual. So whether it's tightening a bolt or driving a cab, or whatever, it can be seen as spiritual. But granted, we understand that some activities are more aligned with pure devotional service, and others where we're making the best use of the bad bargain we've been handed in the material world. And that's all I have to say. Saraswati Mataji has her hand up.
Thank you. I've got a question, and I also wanted to share something that I read. But I'll start with sharing something that Srila Prabhupada said, which I can really appreciate and try very hard to implement. And he's talking about controlling the mind. So he says, the tiger and the lion are trained up to play in the circus. Do you know how it is done? After catching them from the forest, they are kept within the bars and no eating for at least 1 week. Then the trainer comes and only whips. He comes and opens the door and only whips. So already the tiger is hungry, weak, and he's whipped. In this way, he becomes fearful. As soon as the man comes, he becomes fearful. Then he gives him a little food. In this way, after all, it is an animal. He thinks, this man is my God. He can save me. He can kill me. Then he takes to him. Whatever he says, he takes. Similarly, if you do not give the ingredients for sense enjoyment, the mind will be controlled. That is the beginning. You simply don't give. The mind wants. Now let me go to the restaurant. No, sir. Beat him with the shoes. Instead of going to the restaurant, beat the mind with the shoes. Then the mind will not again say, go to the restaurant. So this is how to control the mind. And my question is, in this verse, it says, it said, sorry, it talks about how the demigods influence the different senses. Our senses are also controlled by different demigods, and it says, the senses led by the mind act under the influence of the demigods. So my question is, if the demigods are basically controlling the different senses, then we know the demigods themselves also have a problem with controlling their senses. They're not all demigods are not all pure devotees. So if they're already in charge of this department of the controlling the senses, then shouldn't they be masters of the senses for their own purpose as well? I hope that makes sense, Haribo.
Anyone like to respond to Mother Saraswati's question? I was thinking about how the demigods, although they may be cast as mixed devotees, they are responsible in their administrative duties. And therefore they carry out their responsibilities in terms of the material nature. So the senses are under the control of the demigods, and we're experiencing the reactions of both pious and impious activities, and the senses are affected in such a way we're under the control of material nature, and the demigods are acting according to their responsibilities in meting out those reactions. So they're not, they may not be always 100% pure devotees, but they are responsible, engaged in their duties. What was that? Does anyone else have any comment?
I just would like to add that this analogy that Prabhupada made about taming a lion or a tiger, it sounds really harsh, and sometimes you hear about people taming wild animals, through affectionate dealings. But I mean, this is an instruction to us on how to deal with our own minds. And if we're not pure devotees, we're basically not better than animals, really. We're driven by the same drives, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. And you can't really reason with an animal. You can only try to control it. If it's wild and it's angry and it's determined to have what it wants, maybe you can train a lion that isn't hungry, but a lion in the wild in the chase, you try and stop it, if it's trying to hunt down something. So we're all like that in one respect with our material desires. We're constantly thinking, I want that, I want that, I want that, I want that. And if we don't exert some kind of control on that wild mind, then it will win. It will conquer over us instead of we conquering over it. And so we need to be somewhat stern with ourselves. I don't think this is something we should apply to others, and treat them like wild animals, but people need to realize this for themselves, that our minds and our desires are pretty untamed, and we have to practice taming them before we can make friends with them.
It's nice. I was thinking of that verse, Narada Pancharatra, Sarvapadi Vinirmuktam Tat Paratvena Nirmalam Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam Bhakti Uchite, when reading this purport, that devotional service means to engage the senses in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Rishikesh, the master of the senses. So you're engaging your senses in the service of the master of the senses, Rishikesh. And by that service, one becomes free from material designations, and the senses become purified. The senses are in an impure state. In Bhagavad Gita, we have a nice description about how lust has invaded the senses, including the mind, and that one is entrapped by this terrible enemy, Mahavairanam, in the form of lust, which desire and so forth. And so the senses had to be purified if they're to be engaged properly in the service of the Lord. But by the process of devotional service, the senses become purified. The wonderful thing about it is that one can start in an impure state, and by the regulative principles and so forth, one makes this advancement where the senses become less and less disturbed by external influences and by the polluting factors of lust, anger, greed, envy, illusion, fear, and so forth. The mind becomes purified because the mind is engaged in the master of the senses, in service of the master of the senses, and the senses themselves are engaged in the service by the mind. So that is a nice position. The other verse I was thinking of was that fourth chapter Bhagavad Gita verse. Brahmarpanam, Brahmahavir, Brahmagna, Brahmanahutam, Brahmaivatenda Gantavyam, Brahma Karma Samadhina. That devotional service, it's such a complete process that everything engaged in that process becomes purified. You know, because it's in your senses and everything is engaged in the service of the Absolute. They're functionally and essentially on the spiritual platform. Everything becomes purified. Brahmaiva tenta gantavya, Brahma karma samadhi. All of one's activities become spiritual. So that's the nice position of engaging in Krishna consciousness. Everything about it is auspicious, purifying, because it's in contact with Krishna. And I think we're at time now. Any other comments? Or I don't think we have time for another verse.
There's one in a comment from Murari Gupta Prabhu in the chat box.
Yeah. Murari Gupta Prabhu says, there's a late comment from the previous verse. I remember coming across Prabhupada's reference to over-intelligent, which was a new concept for me and helped simplify accepting the philosophy without trying to be a genius. In a way, Prabhupada has done all the important thinking for us so that we don't need to be over-intelligent.
Yeah, true. So I think Srila Prabhupada appreciated it when his devotees exhibited intelligence in preaching and approaching their service. But yeah, our business is to follow. We present ourselves as anything but fools before our spiritual master will inevitably be so. Is there anything else? Would someone like to lead Venkatesh Prabhu? Would you like to lead the closing kirtan?
Sorry, I have some cold.
Oh, you have some cold. Okay. Anyone else? Krishna Konteya Prabhu. Hari Hari.
Yes.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Haribo. Jai
Go ahead.
Jayam Vishnupad, Paramahamsa, Parivajagacharya, Astutarasata, Sri Srimad, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta, Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad, Ramasa, Parivajagacharya, Astutar, Sata Sri Srimad, His Divine Grace, Bhakti Siddhanta Swami Goswami, Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya, Savior of the World, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Praying say, Kaho Sri Krishna, Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhar, Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa, Gopinath Shamakun, Radhakun, Giri Govardhana Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Shri Mathura Dham Ki Jai. Shri Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Shri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Yamuna Mai Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Priya Madanga Ki Jai. Gaur Premanandi Hare Bo. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Jai.
Thank you so much, Krishna Kanteya Prabhu. Thank you, Panchatattva Prabhu. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. Thank you, Gurudev. Haribol.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you, Panchatattva Prabhu.
Thank you for keeping time with us in the wee hours of the morning there in Sri Vrindavan.
And also, again, reminding that daylight saving time ends on Sunday, early Sunday morning. So those in India, please show up an hour earlier.
Oh my God. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Maharaj. It's nice to see you.
Great. Spring ahead, fall back. We turn the clocks back on Sunday morning.
Maybe we should just leave them turned forward. Hare Krishna.
Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. His Holiness Jayadvaita Maharaj and friends ki jai.
Samaveta Bhakta Brinda ki jai on behalf of His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami.